So I will say that I know you've probably been sitting all day. I mean, besides some presentations that have been a little bit more active, but we don't recommend standing for more than 20% of the day. I mean, as a NICU professional, you probably stand way more than that, but getting back to your roots and standing during this presentation and stretching, whatever you need, go ahead. Feel free to get all the wiggles out. All right. So while healthcare professionals have been studied, there have not been many specific studies for NICU employees. So we know that healthcare professionals are more at risk for developing musculoskeletal disorders as compared to other employees in other industries. There have been studies on doctors that have shown that they are at more risk for back issues, hand and wrist pain, shoulder issues. And one study that was done on NICU employees has shown increased risk for neck issues, back issues, hands, wrist, and shoulders. So what is ergonomics? Ergonomics involves fitting the workstation and the job to the individual. So everyone is created differently. So we want to make sure that we can fit what they're doing to them. So in a personal sense, we want to make sure that the person is expressing proper postures, they have good habits, they're managing their health conditions, as well as managing stress, fatigue, burnout. In their environment, we want to make sure that the work area is fitting the individual. We want to make sure that they have adequate tools that fit them, and we can manage other things like noise coming from alarms. And the job itself, so managing job demands, taking breaks, managing shift times, and trying to mitigate the risks that come with long procedures. So working in the NICU is quite complex, as you all know. So there is a complexity of care that is associated with these tasks that have a very low tolerance for error. So while you're doing these things that are very precise, it's going on for a long time with long shifts, and this can lead to a lot of psychological stress as well as physical stress. So finding a way to mitigate those demands from repetitive stress. All right, so we have posture, repetition, and force. So we want to make sure that awkward postures are reduced. So our muscles and tendons are at risk for injury, and we want to place them in a more advantageous position. Repetition, so frequent repetitive motions can slowly fatigue muscles and lead to decreased productivity. Force, such as gripping, tools, holding babies, can lead to fatigue. Pushing, pulling, carrying can lead to overload and make our bodies tired. And multipliers such as temperature, vibration, contact stress, and lighting can make these risk factors worse. So hot temperatures can fatigue muscles, cold temperatures can make you stiff, vibration can rob the body of blood flow, contact stress can also reduce blood flow, and dim lights can cause eye strain, very bright lights can cause glare and eye strain as well. So we want to make sure that we're caring for our bodies as much as possible during these long shifts. In studies, there have been an assessment of the ergonomic risks. So the higher risk tasks involve lumbar punctures as well as intubating a patient. So the intubating patients was higher because of the increased forward flexing, and lumbar punctures were due to the side bending of a trunk as well as the long time for procedures. Placing lines was under that. It was just because they were using a height adjustable isolette, and documenting also had a high risk score due to the fixed wall mounted workstations. All right. And if it's not neutral, it's awkward. So we want to try to position ourselves in the most neutral posture possible. So awkward postures involve reaching forward, reaching up, bending, squatting, kneeling, and twisting. So we want to adjust ourselves as much as possible to avoid fatigue. So our heads are remarkably heavy. So every degree that they are off of our neutral positioning adds more and more force to our more weight to our neck. So as you can see, the tech's neck, it's more uncomfortable when we're lurching our head forward, which can happen when we are struggling to see, when we are trying to read something that is lower, and if we are writing or using the computer. So just remembering to tuck the neck, even if we're struggling to see, trying to increase the zoom on a screen, trying to move the screen closer if possible. If we're reading something that's down on a desk, just picking it up, bringing it closer to our face. All right, so bending over in isolette can cause a lot of stress on our back. So potential twisting of reaching for supplies. So we want to try to move ourselves closer to whatever we're reaching for, or move it closer to us, have it more accessible. This can be tools, this can be a water bottle. If we're sitting down for a long period of time and we would like to have, like to stay hydrated, that's very important. Make sure that we're not having something that we're reaching miles and miles away for. All right, exactly, staying hydrated, fantastic. So just having what we're using as close as possible. So, all right, so bending over in isolette, we want to adjust it. If it's adjustable, adjust it. If it's not adjustable, you're doing this all the time. I know that you're like, you know what, if they just had this, if we just had a cushion here, if we just could move this thing just an inch, if this could be just a little bit higher, say something, Oftentimes the people that are doing it the most know the most, the people that are designing it may not be doing it all the time. So if you see something, say something. You have those solutions, say, let's work to have those solutions implemented. All right, so we want to, if the isolette is too low, if it can be adjusted, bringing it up. This is a lot easier, of course, if we're working with someone that is of a similar height. I mean, obviously, if we have someone that's like 6'2" and 5'0", that's going to be a little bit difficult to find a height that works for two people. But just trying to find ways to have balance and take care of your bodies while you're taking care of others. All right, with our shoulders and elbows. So we want to stay within our power zone. So our power zone is our most neutral posture. So when we're working here, close to our body, we're stronger. Imagine holding, let's say, a water bottle right here. You can hold it a lot longer than if you're holding it all the way out here, all right? So we want to try to stay here as much as possible. Our most neutral posture is a handshake position. So trying to keep that as much as possible. So working on an isolette, so we want to try to bring ourselves closer if we find ourselves reaching. If we're working at a workstation, we're working at an adjustable computer workstation, trying to position where we're writing at our resting elbow height. Finding your resting elbow height is basically placing your hands by your side or placing your hands by your lap, relaxing your shoulders, and resting elbow height right under your elbow. And you can see here, so reaching versus just taking a step closer and performing the same procedure. All right, so staying within our power zone, so working right here within our elbow reach as much as possible, occasionally working with a slight reach and trying to avoid maximum reach. So it's recommended to move things closer, having a smaller table, or having more frequent tables so that you can adjust them and move things out as necessary. So again, with our wrist, handshake position is the most neutral, so trying to avoid deviation in other directions. So we just want to try to stay aware when we're doing fine motor tasks or working on the computer. So if you find that you're deviating your wrists, maybe you need a bigger keyboard. Maybe you're trying to, try to hunch over, trying to use a small, maybe an Apple keyboard, trying to relax your shoulders. And if, finding what works best for you. Someone that's more petite might really benefit from one of those smaller, more compact keyboards, but it might not work for someone that has broader shoulders or bigger hands. So when administering a lumbar puncture, it requires a lot of fine motor precision. So the practitioner has limited ability to reposition the patient, so the solution is to reposition the practitioner. So trying to do what you can, what's in your power. I know that we know that we can't control everything, but just trying to do what we can. And gloves. So making sure that we have the right size gloves. I know this is something that comes up a lot. So large gloves can lead to excess pinching. This can make it difficult to do fine motor activities. Small gloves that are too small can lead to decreased circulation. They can lead to compression of the carpal nerves. So we want to make sure that we have the right gloves in stock and near us and prepped for what we're about to do. So force is the amount of effort needed to complete a task. So this can be done pushing, pulling, carrying, doing anything. Literally just standing there statically. Force is acting on us. So the risk increases with prolonged insertion. So carrying something for a long time, doing a procedure that we can't really take an extended break for, just standing up for a long period of time, watching something, waiting for something to happen. So that can cause a lot of static load and force. So here are 3 different examples of insoles for when you're standing. So they distribute force in different ways. They can reduce the static load of standing by distributing the contact stress. And there are different tools. So if you can't necessarily take a complete seat, there are industrial leaning stools. So while you're completing a procedure that is requiring a long period of standing, you can sort of just lean back onto the stool and it can just help take the load off your feet. So it's recommended for long procedures and it's height adjustable so that it can fit different individuals. So body mechanics is the study of mechanics of the living body. So making sure that forces that are exerted on your muscles are managed. So we want to mitigate unsafe behaviors that can contribute to a lot of occupational injuries. So we want to prevent our body and our mind from becoming lazy with our movement patterns. So instead of, I'll use my legs to lift this, I'll just use my back. You don't think about it. Your body's just getting into your body's tired. Your mind might be tired. You might not be thinking about it. Trying to have those good habits to keep your body safe. So here are some common cues. We want to engage our core. So as a yoga instructor, I always heard, draw your belly towards your spine. I had no idea what that meant. I still don't know what that means, but I know how to engage my core. So the tip that worked for me is to have a boxer belly, okay? So if someone were to come up and into your stomach, you wouldn't lose any air. You're keeping your core engaged and you're still able to breathe. So if someone were to come up and tap on your stomach, you wouldn't be losing any air. Engaging your back, so that's drawing your shoulders back, trying to keep our hips in line with our shoulder, in line with our ear. So you might find that you're rounding your shoulders, just pulling your shoulder blades back and allowing your back to really set the tone of your posture. So this can be when you're standing or sitting, and keeping your weight in your heels. So a great cue is to screw dinner plates into the ground with your feet. So it might be easier to lose your balance if your weight isn't in your heels. Try to screw your feet into the ground, or some people like to claw down. To each their own. I prefer the dinner plates. All right, and a hip hinge. This is an essential movement for anyone. So we want to draw our hips back. So we want to pretend that we have a string going around our hips and someone is pulling us from the back, or someone is pulling us back by our pockets. So this might be difficult if our muscles are stiff, if we have tight hamstrings. Hamstrings are going to make this easy or difficult, but it's very essential. So we're going to try to keep our back straight. So we don't want to round our back. We want to pretend that we have let's say a broom that's hitting our hips, our back, and our head at the same time. And we want to lean forward. So as we lean forward, bending at the hips, feel free to bend your knees when you find that you're about to start rounding or you're using your back. So we want to use our hips to hinge as forward as much as possible. So if we're reaching forward, try to hinge and reach. If we're bending down, try to do the same thing, and it can involve more knee bending. And for twisting, we want to avoid twisting our back. We want to turn our feet and then bring our hips and our shoulders in the same movement. All right. And with our computer workstation, I recommend making it adjustable. So adjusting it to you as much as possible. So this is your chance to get off your feet. This is a micro break. Doesn't feel like a break because probably documenting for a long time. But it's your chance to take a seat. So we want to start with our chair. We want to have our feet flat on the ground or supported. We don't want to have our feet dangling. That can lead to a lot of stress and strain on our lower back. So there's the ring there, but we want to try to prevent our legs from having circulation cut off. So trying to use the footrest in front, or the legs of the workstation in front of us. Sitting back in our chair, so just perching on the edge of our chair or leaning forward, that can also cause a lot of strain to our lower back. Sitting back in the chair is a good cue to remember to just relax our shoulders, having our shoulders out of our ears, and having our eyes just look forward. So sometimes when we're using a laptop, it can be, all right, our hands are in the right place or our eyes are in the right place. It's never usually both. So that's the great advantage of having an external keyboard and mouse or an external monitor, so that we can have both of those things adjust correctly. And we want to have our eyes within the top 1/3 of the screen and bring items close to us. So if we find that we're reaching too much, we want to bring ourselves closer or bring the item closer. So if we have a keyboard tray, bringing the keyboard tray closer to us, or just scooting our chair forward. If you find that armrests are in the way, armrests aren't necessary while you're typing or using a computer, so you can just drop those out of the way. And we want to try to take breaks. So you might think, this is important. We really just want to power through this. We want to get this done. This is time sensitive. Those are all true. But we want to make sure that we're taking breaks over the course of that extended activity. So it might be every time this happens within this procedure, I want to remember to relax my shoulders. So it doesn't have to be, okay, every 10 minutes. It can be something that prompts you to remember that, hey, I need to take this break. So it's all about counterbalance movements. So if you find yourself looking down often over an isolette, remembering to look up at the ceiling and drawing your shoulders back. If you find yourself sitting for a long period of time, remembering to take standing breaks. So this doesn't have to be, okay, I'm going to take a walk around the building. We don't expect that of you, once every hour or anything, but you can just take a quick standing break for a couple of seconds and then sit back down. If you find that you're standing for a long period of time, sitting down for a couple of seconds and then standing back up. And warm-ups are very beneficial to preventing musculoskeletal disorders and injuries. So warm-ups prepare muscles for activity throughout the day. So it increases your blood temperature, your body temperature, your circulation, joint flexibility, and it increases your range of motion. So when we're doing warm-ups, we want it to be for the motion that we're doing throughout the day. So if you find that you're going to be leaning or reaching, try practicing the hip hinge, making sure we get it down. And it's great to do that in a group. So groups can encourage others, keep each other accountable. So making sure it's getting done. It can be done as a shift change before the morning rounds. Doing it as a group can be really great to focus on larger muscle groups. Everyone has some different ideas. Hey, I noticed this. Hey, I noticed this. Making sure that you can focus on the task at hand and just warming up your body, ready for activity. Can last anywhere between 5 and 10 minutes. And at the end of your shift, this is fantastic. So this brings our hips, back, and neck into neutral position, and it will decrease inflammation, and it's important to remember to breathe from your belly. So allowing your entire body to relax. And finally, we want to adjust our behavior and our equipment. So with our behavior, we want to make sure that we're staying neutral, taking breaks, warming up, and reporting things early, and using recovery strategies to prevent injuries. And with equipment, we want to make sure that we can have height adjustable equipment such as stools, workstations, footrests, if necessary, reduced reach keyboards, lumbar support cushions, and proper size gloves. And these additional resources, such as a NICU pre-shift dynamic warm-up program and some ergo tips, are available after the conference. All right, anybody have any questions?